I never imagined an ordinary weekday morning would turn into something that would change how I saw relationships forever. My best friend's mother had asked me to accompany her to the bank because she had some documents to sign and wanted an extra pair of eyes for support. I agreed without thinking much. She was always kind to me, treating me like more than just her son's friend. Over the years, I had grown to respect her calmness, her thoughtful advice, and the way she carried herself with quiet dignity. Even though I never admitted it, there was something about her presence that made me pay attention in a way I rarely did with anyone else. The bank was busy that day, people standing in lines, others filling out forms, the usual noise of shuffling papers and murmured conversations. She and I finished what we came for, but just as we were preparing to leave, an unexpected announcement came from the staff. Due to a sudden technical failure in their systems, no one was allowed to exit for safety reasons until everything was secure again. Doors were temporarily locked, and we were asked to remain calm. At first, I thought it would only take a few minutes, but as time stretched, it became clear that we were stuck for longer than expected. People reacted in different ways. Some complained loudly, others buried themselves in their phones. But she remained calm, even reassuring those around her with gentle words. Watching her handle the situation with patience impressed me more than I could say. I sat beside her in a quieter corner, and for the first time, we found ourselves without distractions. No one rushing us, no schedules to follow, just the two of us with unexpected time together. Our conversation started lightly. She asked about my college classes, my plans after graduation, and whether I still played basketball with her son. But soon it shifted to deeper topics. She spoke of her responsibilities, the challenges of managing everything alone since her divorce, and the way life often left her feeling unseen. I listened more carefully than I ever had before. I noticed the tiredness hidden behind her steady smile, the quiet strength it must take to stand tall despite everything. There was something different about the way she spoke to me now. It wasn't the usual polite exchanges I was used to. It was honest and unfiltered, almost as though she finally had someone she could confide in. I realized she trusted me enough to share a side of herself that even my friend probably didn't see. That thought made me feel responsible, but also strangely connected. I told her about my own doubts, how I sometimes felt lost trying to meet expectations, how I wanted to do something meaningful, but wasn't sure how. Instead of dismissing my worries, she listened with genuine interest. She encouraged me, telling me that my awareness of those feelings was already proof of maturity. As the minutes passed, the noises of the bank seemed to fade into the background. For once, it didn't feel like I was just a young man sitting with his friend's mom. It felt like two people discovering a quiet understanding. There was no rush, no judgment, only a growing awareness that this unexpected situation was allowing us to see each other differently. The strange reality of being trapped no longer felt like an inconvenience. It began to feel like a rare chance, a moment suspended in time where two lives crossed in a way they never had before. Time seemed to move differently the longer we stayed inside. What had started as casual conversation began to turn into something far more personal. She opened up about her life in a way I had never heard before. She told me about how difficult it had been raising her son alone, how she sacrificed her own dreams so he could have stability, and how often she felt like people only saw her as a caretaker, not as a person with hopes and feelings of her own. Listening to her, I realized how much strength it took to be the person she was, and I couldn't help but admire her even more deeply. I responded with honesty too. I admitted that I sometimes felt like I was just drifting, trying to live up to expectations from family and society, but not always knowing where I belonged. I told her about the pressure of trying to look strong on the outside while feeling uncertain inside. She didn't laugh or brush it aside. Instead, she gave me her full attention, her eyes steady on mine as if every word mattered. That kind of presence was rare, and it made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt before. Our words slowly turned into laughter as we began sharing lighter memories, small moments that shaped who we were. She told me stories about her younger days, how she used to dream of traveling, and how sometimes she still wondered what her life might have been if things had gone differently. There was a softness in her tone when she admitted she rarely shared those thoughts with anyone. I realized then that behind her calm and graceful image, there was a woman who had carried so much quietly, yet still held a spark of youth inside her. As we sat there, I noticed how natural it felt to be with her. It wasn't forced or awkward. It was simply two people discovering each other beyond the roles life had given them. She wasn't just my friend's mom in that moment. She was someone who carried wisdom, kindness, and a gentle vulnerability that drew me closer. Every time she smiled, it felt like the air around us lightened. Every time her voice softened, I felt a warmth spread through me that I couldn't quite explain. There was a moment when she reached for her bag and brushed her hand against mine. It was accidental, but the touch lingered in my mind. She smiled faintly, and I couldn't tell if it was because she noticed the same spark I felt, or if she was simply being polite. Still, that brief connection made me more aware of how my heart was racing, how every second in her company felt like something rare and fragile. What struck me most was how comfortable I felt revealing myself to her. Normally, I kept my struggles hidden, but with her, words came easily. She made me feel safe, like I didn't need to pretend or wear a mask. And I could sense she felt a similar comfort with me, as if the stress of holding everything together in her daily life eased just by sharing it with someone willing to listen. By then, I realized this wasn't just small talk to pass the time while we were stuck. It was an exchange of truths we hadn't voiced before. We were giving each other something we both needed: understanding. There was a closeness forming, one that didn't need to be spoken out loud to be real. The bank, the people around us, the situation, it all became background noise compared to the bond quietly unfolding between us. Hours passed, and the uneasy tension that had filled the air at the beginning was replaced by a quiet stillness. The staff reassured everyone that the situation was being handled, but by then, what mattered to me most wasn't how much longer we'd be stuck, but the fact that I was sitting there beside her, listening to her voice, sharing pieces of myself I had never shared with anyone. It felt like time had carved out a space just for us, and in that space, something unexpected was taking shape. She leaned back, exhaling softly, and told me she hadn't felt this light in years. She admitted that most days were routine and predictable, filled with responsibility, but little joy. Then she glanced at me, her eyes warmer than before, and said she appreciated how I listened to her, without judgment. It caught me off guard, because in my mind, I hadn't done anything extraordinary. But to her, being heard was rare, and in that moment, I understood how powerful the smallest gestures can be. I told her that she deserved far more than just carrying silent burdens. I told her that anyone who truly saw her would realize how much she gave, and how much strength it took to give it. She smiled in a way that was different from before. It wasn't polite or casual. It was tender, almost like she wanted to hold on to the moment. Then, in a voice soft but steady, she said, "You've been so kind. Maybe you deserve a reward." The words hung in the air, simple yet layered with meaning. My heart raced, wondering what she meant. But instead of teasing or brushing it aside, she continued, explaining that the reward she wanted to give wasn't material. It was trust, it was honesty, it was allowing herself to be vulnerable with someone who made her feel valued. She told me she hadn't allowed herself to open up in a long time, but something about the way I carry myself, the way I respected her, made her feel safe enough to do so now. I didn't know how to respond at first. Part of me was overwhelmed that she even saw me that way, but another part felt deeply moved. I told her that I admired her more than words could capture, that she had a presence which inspired me, and that sitting here with her had already felt like a gift I would never forget. She looked at me, and for a few moments, we didn't speak. Our eyes met, and there was no need for explanations. We both knew that a bond had been created that went beyond circumstance. The reward, I realized, wasn't something she gave me in her words alone. It was the connection itself, the kind of closeness that doesn't rely on years of history but on truth shared at the right time. She was showing me that I mattered, that my care and attention weren't unnoticed. And in return, I was giving her the assurance that she was still seen, still valued, still cherished as a woman with depth and grace. What stayed with me was how natural it felt. There was no rush, no boundary crossed. It was simply two hearts finding recognition in each other. In the middle of a place where everyone else saw inconvenience, we had discovered something rare. Her reward wasn't physical. It was the gift of knowing each other in a way we never had before, and perhaps never would have, if not for that unexpected moment of being trapped together. Not long after our conversation reached its quiet peak, the announcement finally came that the systems were restored and the doors were being reopened. People around us began gathering their belongings, relieved that the unexpected pause in their day was finally over. Yet for me, the thought of leaving that space carried a strange weight. The hours we had spent together had felt like a world of their own, a bubble where honesty and connection had bloomed without interruption. As we stood to leave, I realized that once we walked out of the bank, everything would return to normal, but nothing would ever feel quite the same to me again. We walked side by side, neither of us rushing. Outside, the daylight felt brighter, the noise of the city louder, almost as if the world wanted to remind us that it hadn't stopped while we were inside. She glanced at me and gave a faint smile, the kind that carried gratitude more than words could. On the ride home, the silence between us wasn't awkward. It was thoughtful, almost protective of the fragile understanding that had formed. Every so often, our eyes met, and though neither of us spoke about what had passed, we both knew it had left an imprint. Before parting ways, she turned to me and thanked me again, not in the casual manner one uses for small favors, but in a voice that carried depth. She told me she would always remember how I made her feel that day, not just as someone's mother or someone's caretaker, but as a woman who still had value, who still deserved to be heard and appreciated. Those words stayed with me long after she stepped away, because I knew how rare it was for her to express something so openly. As I walked back alone, my mind kept replaying the hours we had spent together. What struck me most was not just what she said, but how she allowed herself to say it. Her reward was not about gestures or promises. It was about letting me into a part of her world she usually kept hidden. And in return, she had given me a new way of seeing not only her, but also relationships themselves. It wasn't about grand declarations or dramatic moments. It was about presence, empathy, and the courage to look beyond roles and see the person beneath. I understood then that the experience had changed me. I realized how often we overlook the people around us, assuming we know their stories when in truth, we only see fragments. She had taught me that sometimes the greatest connection happens in the most ordinary or even inconvenient places, and that the real treasure lies in listening, in being there, in recognizing another human being fully. The bank incident could have been nothing more than a frustrating delay, but instead, it became a turning point that gave me clarity about what it means to care and be cared for. As time went on, we didn't speak about that day directly, but the bond remained in small ways. Whenever I visited my friend, her eyes carried the same warmth of acknowledgement, a quiet reminder of what we had shared. I knew we both chose to keep that memory untouched, preserved as something too delicate to explain to anyone else. It wasn't a secret with guilt attached, but a moment of truth we both respected. In the end, what I carried with me was not a fantasy or an illusion, but a real experience that showed me how love and affection can take many forms. It can be as simple as giving someone your full attention, as profound as making them feel seen in their most vulnerable state. That day taught me that sometimes the reward life gives us is not material, not visible, but emotional, an unspoken bond that shapes the way we understand connection. And for me, that reward will always remain one of the most meaningful gifts I ever received.